afternoon, everyone. Please continue to enjoy your lunch. We're going to have a few activities, a few announcements during your lunch. So if I could just have your attention through this process, but please, again, you want to enjoy your meals. A few things that I want to go over. First, the activities from here to the end include tonight's outing to the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, and there will be a bus that's running beginning about 6 o'clock and running the loop from outside of the conference center, so you can board there. It will run on a continuous loop all the way to the end of the event, so you can come and go as you choose to. It's casual, so feel free to dress for the weather. And there also is a trolley that runs along out front of the hotel. You can pick it up in front of the hotel if you prefer to use the trolley, the blue line. You can catch that trolley out front on the bar side of the hotel. Or you can walk if you choose to. I'm not sure that's wise, but you can do that if you want to. Or there is parking there for event. Please remember also to bring your name tags so that you can get your drink ticket when you arrive, and enjoy some music, and just chance to socialize and no program tonight. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge all our sponsors for this conference. These sponsors that we have, the various sponsors, are really involved in our discipline, and they do good work for us. So we're happy to have them here to work with us, as well as, of course, to market their products. But it is really a joy to work with some of these representatives. And we're going to hear in a little while from some representatives from paramedics. And this organization has tried to work directly with writing teachers, and would love to have conversations with you about the work that they're doing. They will give us a brief 15-minute presentation coming up in just a little while you finish your lunches. So again, we welcome and thank them for their sponsorship. Aranos is the lead sponsor this year of the conference, and we appreciate that sponsorship. At this point, I'd also like to invite Kirsten up for just a minute. We're going to let Kirsten enjoy herself a little bit now. She's told us how to get our lunch, where to get the bus, taking care of us all through this conference. So we want to make sure we have a moment to thank her, and also to thank her local arrangements committee. So Kirsten, you can come up.
Today, this evening, and then tomorrow at the town hall. Just enjoy yourselves from here on. I also want to say again, just thank you to all of the local team. I'm not going to list everyone at this time, but it really has been a team effort to put all this together, and I appreciate UT Conferences, the Hilton, and an entire crew of graduate students from the University of Tennessee, and faculty members who have helped so much to put all of this together. So I appreciate it, and I think that we need to, if you join me in also congratulating them and thanking them again one more time.
Kirsten's been at this for quite some time, developing this for us and working. It's almost like my full-time job. You can imagine all the little details that went into this conference. So we do thank her for all that work, and in addition to the flowers that drip water all over her with, we're also on behalf of the organization presenting Kirsten with a dinner out here at the Chesapeake here in Knoxville, where she can go eat without having to worry about whether or not everyone else is getting anything to eat, and perhaps enjoy a good evening out. So thanks again, Kirsten. We appreciate all the work. As we come closer to the end of this year's conference, we also want to think a little bit about next year's conference. So I would like to invite Kathy DeBoer to come up and talk a little bit about our conference next year in Sacramento.
Hi everybody, I am happy to remind you that next year's conference will be hosted by the Northern California Nevada Writing Program Administrators Affiliate. So there are a group of us in Northern California and Nevada who put together a proposal that was accepted. The conference will be in Sacramento, which is a lovely town if you've never been there. We are working closely with Dominic and the executive board to plan a great, engaging time for you in probably an equally warm location, but with far less humidity. It will be a great opportunity to go far west. The conference hasn't been west of the Rockies in a decade, so it'll be nice to interact with some of your colleagues on the West Coast who aren't always able to travel this far to do this work with all of us. And further details will be coming about conference theme and local events, but we are hard at work planning a fun, engaging, and stimulating conference.
So before we get to the PowerNotes presentation, just a couple of quick notes about our continued attempt to hear from all of you and to learn from you what you've learned and heard and seen at this conference. In a little while after the PowerNotes presentation, Tony Scott and Nancy Welch will join us again and give us some of their observations from being about the conference, but also inviting you to provide some of your observations and questions about the things we face as writing program administrators. There'll be another opportunity tomorrow morning at the town hall where we will have some interactive sessions, the opportunity to interact with the executive board members to, again, make known the kinds of things that you are facing in your writing program as a writing program administrator and the priorities for this organization going forward. As I wandered around and was listening to the various tones of the conversations today, there is a mixture of joy, satisfaction, pride, and sometimes despair, what Thoreau would call the lives of quiet desperation that we lead. All of those things mix up in the work we do, and we keep going because of the happy moments, and we struggle together, and I do think together is the way we should do this, which is the theme of this conference. So in a little while, we will have the opportunity for us to hear your voice. You are the organization. The volunteers that work on this organization are crucial to the work we do. And we will, as an executive board, as officers, hear your voices and do our best to try to serve those things. Most of all, though, I think, is that we feel gratitude for this mission that we have together. The ability to serve our students in one of the most important abilities and the thing that most makes them human, their literacies. So it is, despite all the challenges, it is a great joy to both do this work and also work with you as we all do this work. So thank you so much for all of this. So at this point, I'd like to invite Dan Hodgman and Wilson Sue to join us and tell us a little bit about the product, PowerNotes. Thank you. For the end of the period, we're going to have a chance to hear again from Tony Scott and Nancy Welch. We're inviting them, and I hope that they would begin our conference with their plenary in a way that would focus us on the topic of this conference and keep it on our mind throughout. And as I wandered around and went to sessions, I think that job was done in a really excellent way. I heard over and over again references to the opening plenary as well as to this theme. So now we'll have the opportunity to give their observations and then hear your observations as well. So Tony and Nancy, thanks. just mention also that during the question and answer, we will have microphones to come around with. It's important that you use those both so everyone can hear and for the video and for accessibility. So we'll be running around with those afterwards.
Hello everyone, thanks for hanging in there today. I know the day starts to get long, especially in the second day. I'm impressed with how many people we still have here today. What I did this morning is, after a very full and I think thought-provoking day yesterday, I woke up and I started writing. And I did I think this is kind of a stream of consciousness thing. Maybe I wrote it when I was sleeping and just jotted it down when I got up. But anyway, I'll share this with you. We were asked to be flies on the wall, and we just interpreted that as splitting up sessions, going to as many as we could, thinking through what we saw, and trying to pull out some thoughts and some themes out of that. So yesterday, Aubrey Schiavone won the Graduate Research Award for a dissertation project, and it examined the experiences of a racially diverse group of working class first-gen students. And I'm going to quote what how Aubrey described her research. Is Aubrey here? Can she tell me? Okay. Well, I'm going to speak for Aubrey for a second, but this is her. Findings from this study indicate that first-gens bring transformative literacies to their first-year writing context, including rhetorical listening, imitational rhetoric, and audience awareness. And this dissertation study offers rich description of this often overlooked student population, privileges student voices, and better illuminates the complex speaking and writing literacies these students contribute to the first-year writing courses. So Aubrey's excellent, committed, conscientious work takes a segment of the student population that's often labeled underprepared, and I'll admit that underprepared is not a term I'm a fan of, and often marked as in need of special help. But rather than finding deficits, she locates the competencies of those students, that they bring to the table. Their racial and socioeconomically diverse backgrounds, in Aubrey's words, enable them to contribute to their first-year writing courses. A few years ago, a former colleague of mine, DeMarty Dutta, and I were doing research that examined a pilot project that we developed for writing with international students. And I'm not going to go into detail about either the project or the pilot, there's just not time. But one of the study's participants was Krista, a student from Burundi. Krista led a fascinating life, speaking both Kirundi and French growing up, Kirundi as a primary home language and French as a primary school language. Although throughout her early life, she switched back and forth between the two languages, depending on the nuances of the situation. She later learned English with a view toward attending school in the U.S. Krista told a story of how she needed to travel to Kenya to take the TOEFL because there were limited opportunities to take the TOEFL in Burundi, and she needed to pass in order to apply to university in the U.S. While in Kenya and speaking primarily in English, she also had to improvise with Kirundi because it was very close to what she called the home language of Kenya. So here was a student who had extraordinary linguistic and rhetorical knowledge and dexterity, who spoke 3 languages and was capable of moving across rich and varied contexts across 2 continents. Nevertheless, Krista was identified in an assessment as in need of taking an extra writing class at that institution because of perceived deficits in writing in English. Meanwhile, students who could speak only 1 language and had not shown the linguistic and rhetorical dexterity that Krista had, in part because there was no way for the assessment to recognize those competencies, were considered mainstream and not in need of additional coursework. At this conference, not surprisingly, I've been deeply impressed with the skills and dedication, and I think just the sheer hard work of this group. People are doing sophisticated, cool things with data collection, much of it centered on, in one way or another, around outcomes assessment. And then they're using what they find to try to gain resources and make their programs better. Composition in the age of austerity is a stated theme in this conference, but at least as prevalent in the sessions is outcomes assessment. I believe the two are related, but the relationship isn't made explicit. Sociologist William Davies argues that in neoliberal political economy, politics is replaced by economics. More of human life becomes economically rather than politically governed, and areas of life that were formerly seen as public and political are conceptually cleaved away from politics. In the interest of efficiency and the concentration of wealth and power, greater and greater areas of our lives are mapped and metricized. What to value and how to value it appears technical issues, not up for meaningful debate among affected publics. Politics are replaced by economics, and dialogue is preempted by measurement. To be clear, I've been to great sessions at this conference in which people are talking critically about the assessments they're doing. Paul Anderson, for instance, pointing to contradictions in a very influential one-size-fits-all rubric promoted by the American Association of Colleges and Universities. The claim they make is that their rubric can be at once local and context sensitive, but also capable of being applied across disciplines and institutions across the country. Anna Minson and Darcy Toon talked about the critical, nuanced things they're doing with data. Data itself is not an enemy. Assessment of itself is not an enemy. With austerity in mind, though, I'm worried about the amount of time and energy we're putting into measurement and the pursuit of already articulated outcomes at this moment. How does that align with broader trends that include retrenchment, economization, and devaluation of workers in our society? I'm concerned about the extent to which external decisions about what to value in writing are being operationalized in classes without meaningful input from teachers and students. Austerity economics is intended in part to force efficiencies and concentrate power. Many of the cherished values that have compelled composition of law as a field of research and practice are inefficient. Democratic practices are inefficient. Dissonance is inefficient. Dissidence is inefficient. Being inclusive of ideas, experiences, and ways of communicating can look very inefficient. Debates over what to value and how can look inefficient. I'm worried about the extent to which a culture of performance measurement can silence and make things invisible. Like the literate genius of Krista, the student from Burundi, like the work of thousands of teachers that is invisible in so much of our professional discourse, and like the rich, varied competencies that Aubrey study uncovers among students who are often deemed underprepared. Students who Aubrey believes can actually contribute to first-year writing. Thanks.
And I'd like to pick up where Tony left off with two related concerns that I heard voiced in panels yesterday in particular, and that I think are very much conditioned by neoliberalism. Yesterday morning, I was in a lively, theoretically rich, and pedagogically committed session on race talk to counter silence in writing courses and programs, where teachers in the room largely described bearing as individuals the responsibility for figuring out how, in their classrooms, how and whether to cultivate difficult discussions about race, racism, and more, especially in an era of Black Lives Matter and other social movements, and in an era of emboldened alt-right voices in the media, in government, and on our campuses. Participants embodied a strong commitment to developing pedagogies that help students counter silence and learn to engage with one another in race talk. Yet profoundly missing was a sense of programmatic commitment. Remember that neoliberalism delivers its goals of transferring wealth upward, not only through eliminating social supports, but also by reviving and naturalizing the idea that everyone should have their own individual bootstrapping plan. This session underscored for me that we need to think programmatically across course sections, across new teacher training and faculty development, about how to counter silence and cultivate race talk, not leave this on the shoulders of individual and especially more vulnerable graduate students and faculty. Later, I also attended a session on decolonizing the teaching of writing that for me overlaps with and underscores the concerns that Tony just outlined. That we learn to hold in tension the need to provide statistical evidence for student success in our courses for powerful administrative and legislative audiences, with a simultaneous need to listen to and learn from the insights, ideas, and observations of graduate student teachers and other faculty who are discerning how aspects of a set of common syllabus assignments, a grading rubric, norming guidelines are at odds with the needs of students in the classroom or with professed program goals about inclusion, multiliteracies, and other commitments. Neoliberalism doesn't just insist that we learn to do more with less. To ensure that social reproduction, education, for instance, still happens, it also doubles and triples down on assessment and accountability. The danger for our field, I think, is a premium placed on standardization, on the narrowest and most instrumental and most easily measured and quantified outcomes. This danger may be especially felt in programs that face the heaviest accountability mandates with the least funding, which are also the programs primarily serving the students and communities bearing the brunt of the austerity assault. Although this is probably apocryphal, Henry Ford is said to have once complained, "How come every time I want a pair of hands, a man comes attached to them?" His concern was how, on the production line, to eliminate the thinking person, to eliminate thinking people in all their variety in order to ensure a standardized product. I know I'm not saying anything we haven't already been wrestling with, but as we strive to operationalize a measurable set of outcomes for our courses, this kind of Fordism, the complaint of why is it that teaching is attached to a teacher, is a danger we need to stay woke to. But here I'll flag the lessons of a third session from faculty at the City Colleges of New York that offers what I think of as tempered hope. As these panelists emphasized, many participants at this conference come from colleges and universities with long histories of liberatory and democratizing pedagogical commitments and long experience with neoliberal defunding, offloading, and restructuring that began decades before the 2008-2009 financial crisis. The question these panelists pose for us is how we can labor in poverty conditions without conceding to an impoverished curriculum, and how can we do so in ways that does not devalue our students' competencies or our labor. I just came from a session a few moments ago on free speech, anti-fascism, and writing classes, which really highlights the stakes of a robust rhetorical education, as well as the difficult social and political, as well as economic conditions for such a robust education. So again, key questions I'm carrying away from the conference so far is how, within conditions of austerity, do we not concede to an impoverished curriculum, and how can we make room within this conference and beyond to discuss what kind of rhetorical education, literacy education, is urgently needed in these times. Tony and I are offering these impressions as just some of the ways we saw the conference theme articulated and carried through the past day and a half. But we're also offering these impressions as a discussion starter. So what we'd really like to do now is, instead of having a Q&A where somebody asks a question and Tony or I decide who's going to take the mic and answer it, is actually act more as air traffic controllers before Radio Mustard and Union, but to just kind of help guide all of you to take turns at the mic and share your own impressions, experiences, questions, and concerns. Your moments of concern, your bases for hope, and build on what we've started just now. Thank you. And let's see, so Kirsten, I think, has a mic in the back. And,
if you all want, anyone wants to raise their hand, I'll bring the mic to you, and Katie has one over that side.
Hi, I went to a talk yesterday that was led by some of the people who make decisions about giving grants from the CWPA. And it seems to me that there was a really heavy focus on exactly what you were just talking about, that researchers need to, in their proposals, talk about numbers, learn how to crunch numbers, learn about statistics, because the numbers are what is powerful. So I'm wondering to what extent organizations, just like this one, reinforce or reproduce the neoliberal trends that you're talking about in their decisions about who gets money.
I just wanted to piggyback on that. Tony, you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it seems like a catch-22 in terms of developing the always ongoing process of forming ourselves as not just a discipline, but a discipline that has that other people see with status. Because I think the connection there is that we have to give them the information in the form that they want it, and with more and more labor and less time to do things, more demands on us. I'm just concerned about the type of, I like a lot of the work you're talking about and some of the projects I'm seeing here, but the types of methods that are not being accounted for in the context, the messiness that isn't being accounted for because of the desire to make it palatable and neat and deliverable.
Open this up to additional concerns and questions. It doesn't have to be limited to those kinds of starting themes and concerns that Tony and I laid out.
I guess I've been thinking relatedly to the two topics brought up here about not just the kinds of data we expect, but the kinds of questions we let ourselves ask. And so I am a numbers person, and so I see the value there. But I also think that there are lines of inquiry that I wonder how much we're asking the historical questions, the theoretical questions, the pedagogical questions, and what methods we're learning with those. So I think we also ought to be having conversations about why and to what degree and to what extent and to what end.
I'm so glad you asked that question. At NC State, a couple of researchers, Dana Gierowski and Meredith Reed, are in the middle of doing a large study of the impact of class size on both teacher engagement and student learning. That we pull a lot of the language of the NESI into our assessment because that's what we convince our provost. And so I think that article will be ready for publication probably in the next 6 months. So a little plug for our researchers at NC State and saying, yes, that's out there, and that I can put anybody who's interested in seeing the white paper version of that in touch with the researchers. So find me somewhere at the conference and I can give you that contact information. We've shared it with a couple of people on the WPAL who have put out the call for information or data that has been collected to appeal for a lower class size. But if anybody else who is here in this room would like some of that information, I'm happy to put you in contact with Dana and Meredith.
It feels so much like a class is trying to get out of 5 minutes. It's the same thing. Okay, we'll just review the homework.
So I think I would like to say something briefly about that question of the pressures, including those that we reproduce and maybe impose upon ourselves about delivering pictures of what we do as teachers and as administrators, only in one form, in the form of numbers. And that is, I think at some point we've got to pull back and do some soul searching about how well this really is working out for us. Kim Moody, a labor economist, has a book that was published probably about 10 years ago called Workers in a Lean World. And it's about the mechanisms of lean production, so on the production line, about constantly recalibrating, saying, okay, you were able to deliver this level of productivity within these conditions. Now we're going to reset, and we want you to increase your productivity, but now in less time. So the way that work speed-ups happen, for example. And I think what we're looking at is as being workers in conditions of lean social reproduction. So it's like, okay, you've done this pilot, you've delivered this assessment. Now we'd like you to do even more with less. It's just this constant recalibration. And it might be interesting to actually do a kind of longitudinal study of where and how some of our assessments ultimately get used. Do they really get used to increase funding, or is it constantly actually delivering yet another mandate for lean production in education? So just another thought as we continue on to the conference, and a little break before your next session.
While I have a podium, I'm going to throw this in as well. I think that I've become more conscious over the last few years of how much of our research represents a statistical handful of universities. Much of the published research is coming out of a statistical handful of universities' faculty. The vast majority of our students are non-traditional students. And the vast majority of our institutions serve those students. But our research is dominated by faculty at Research One institutions, and we tend to be most concerned because that's where we're embedded with the lives and happenings at those places. So I'll just throw in, we need to do more publishing about more diverse institutions.
I've got a couple more hands up.
So I'd like to address that because I don't work at our one university, and some of our workload prevents us from doing the extensive research that needs to be done. So I listen to some of my colleagues who have a 2-2 workload and are doing research. I have a 4-4 workload, and that's going to decrease what I can publish. It already has decreased what I can publish because I have studies in progress, but they're not getting as fast to print because it takes longer to do the data analysis and get them to print. I'm wondering if they start talking a little bit about how to make that happen so that we can partner together or do something that's going to help us address some of those inequities that you're talking about.
Joyce Carter is on the stream watching us. You can all say hello to Joyce now. And she has asked me to point out the 4C's statement on post-secondary writing recommends no more than 20 students, ideally 15. So we do have that guideline out there that you can use with people who say, why don't you teach 45 students?
Can I just, how many people have 20 or fewer students? That's the cap at your institution.
Wait, what is that?
20 or fewer. 20 or fewer. Maybe 30, 40%.
Yeah, and some of those are classes for L2 writers. So.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to the rest of the conference.
So the next set of sessions start at 2 o'clock. I hope that you'll continue to have conversations across, as Tony and Nancy were able to provide us. Feel free to let us know. I hope to see you in town hall tomorrow morning as well. Enjoy.